Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out.
All right. Super excited for this episode today, guys. Got a great guest that's got a wealth of knowledge, wealth of personal experience, lots of shared experience, who's just truly the consummate professional as far as this field goes. She's big into not only keto, but holistic health for women especially. And she's just got lots of experience. So we have Leanne Vogel on the show today. She's best-selling author. She's at the healthfulpursuit.com, which is an amazing website. I hope you check out. But tell us how we can find you, reach out to you, work with you, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm most active on Instagram at Leanne Vogel. That's Leanne, V as in Victor, Ogel. So that's where I post reels and have a lot of fun. I just discovered the green screen and it's like blowing my mind right now. And then I have a podcast, the Keto Diet Podcast, where I come up with episodes every week. And my website is healthfulpursuit.com.
Such a pleasure to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this because you're such a wealth of knowledge, and I just love your personal experience, your story, as well as all the shared experience that you have to contribute. So thanks for being here. We'll get into it. I wanted you to start with just a little bit of your backstory. How did you even get interested in this kind of low carb thing? And, was that the same that it was today? Just what really got you interested in it from the get-go?
Yeah. So I went off hormonal birth control in 2007, and I didn't get a period back for 8 years total. And around the 7th year, I started thinking maybe this was an issue and I needed to get to the bottom of it. Us women, we don't really love our periods. We have like this love-hate relationship with it. And I had studied holistic nutrition, so I knew how important a period was. And at that point, I just didn't really know where to turn. Doctors were telling me I wouldn't get my period back unless I went on hormonal birth control. That's not a period. Okay. So that's just a breakthrough bleed.
The pseudo.
Exactly. And so I had to go to the literature, and I read. And kind of at the same time, a friend had posted an image of #keto on their Instagram. And at that point, nobody was talking about a ketogenic diet. In fact, I looked up my books for nutrition school years before that, and it said keto equals dangerous, do not do. That's all I learned about the ketogenic diet. So naturally, if somebody tells me not to do something, of course I'm going to do it. So as a vegan, I had been a vegan for pretty much 10 years solid. And I decided, okay, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to eat bacon, I'm going to have coconut oil, I'm going to get into this thing. And after 30 days, I decided I'd never go back to the way I was eating. And fast forward 1.5 years, I got my cycle back. I've now had a period ongoing for 7 years. So just as long as I had amenorrhea, I now have a cycle. So that's kind of how I got introduced to it. And I started in 2014. So not only has the ketogenic space changed so much in the last 6 years, but I have changed also. And I've really learned firsthand, even though I tell my clients this all the time, the diet you needed at a certain time is not the diet you're going to need now, is not the diet you're going to need in 10 years from now. And so I really used a strict ketogenic diet at the beginning to reset my metabolism, and then a ketogenic diet that rotated in carbohydrates to get my hormones back online. And now I kind of dabble in a bunch of different things. Like I had potatoes this morning, and then I just had a macadamia nut bar for lunch, and I probably won't eat for the rest of the day. And so there's this metabolic flexibility that I did not have at all before. And so it's really transformed everything. And I can be doing much different things than I could have back in 2014 when I was really sick and couldn't do any of those things.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I can't believe you were that patient. Like, holy crap, 7 years with amenorrhea, which is lack of a regular cycle. I mean, 7 years, you're like the most patient person on the planet. But like you said, I know with young women, it's a love-hate, right? It's like convenient to not have your period, but you know that it's not awesome for your overall hormonal health to go years and years with no period. And so I loved it that you found a way to, become once again, balance with your hormones. And then you've kind of experimented along the way, which I think is amazing because like you said, I agree 100%. Our bodies need something today, and it might be a little bit different tomorrow and even more different a year from now. And then the same could be said for the past too. We're not, we're living beings. We're not just lab rats, we change on a daily basis. And so I love that you've kind of come to that with your own experience. I know you've worked with thousands of clients over the years as well. One of the things that I'd just love to hear a little bit about, maybe for our listeners, let's just kind of review a couple of terms, if that's okay with you. I've heard
Yes.
your very brief, but no super understandable terminology with respect to what is keto anyway, what is metabolic flexibility. Maybe just start in general with just sort of the low carb definition or keto and just kind of what's happening physiologically, just to remind ourselves and help our viewers.
Yes, completely. In fact, I was sitting across the table from a kid that asked me what a ketogenic diet was. And all my friends heard me describe this and they're like, you need to write a children's book. So it's really important to understand those basics. And I'm so glad that you asked. Basically, there are really two different ways that your body can make energy. We'll make it really simple, right? So there's glucose or fat or ketones. Okay. And so either of these fuel sources can be used. And ideally that metabolic flexibility is being able to use glucose, fat, and just kind of jump between both like you're playing skip rope. But when we are glucose burners, and we've been glucose burners for a long time, we're eating carbohydrates, usually more than 50 grams a day, give or take, depending on your genes and a whole bunch of other things. You are going to burn sugar, okay, as your energy. Where we want to kind of set things and reset our metabolism is with the ketogenic diet, or to reteach our body, relearn how to burn ketones and create ketones and use ketones as energy. And so that's what the ketogenic diet looks to achieve, is to get your body into that fat burning state where you are able to actually burn the fat as energy. Now, there can be issues with that, and we can kind of dive in what I've seen clinically with clients who have messed up livers and require a little bit more support, because the liver is really involved in this process. But, the liver is also involved in the process of burning sugar. And so overall, ketones are going to be a much better fuel source and a much cleaner fuel source than sugar, which is, how I explained it to the kid is you could burn on a really, really dirty fuel, or you could burn on something super clean and great, not only for your body, but the environment. And it's just so much better. And so that's really where ketones are. And that metabolic flexibility is being able to move and ebb and flow between both and not have hangry feelings or feel terrible like many of us do when we don't have food in the morning, or you might feel hangry. Those are some of the symptoms that maybe hint to the fact that you need this metabolic flexibility thing.
Another thing I'm super pumped about is the upcoming Align Limitless event, January 19th through 21st of 2023 in beautiful and warm in January, Tampa, Florida, right on the water. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be amazing. All kinds of just kick butt speakers, including Trent Shelton, myself, Dr. Thomas Hemingway, my wife, Brooke. So many other amazing speakers are coming, like Patrice Washington, who some of you have seen before. She is epic. You're just going to love this event. So if you don't have your tickets yet, time is running out. This will sell out. Align Limitless, Tampa, Florida, January 19th through 21st. Get your tickets now at alignevents.live.com. You can also check out my wife's website, brookehemingway.com, but those tickets will be available for a little bit longer on alignevents.live.com. Go and grab them today.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I thank you so much for that, because everybody sort of explains it a little bit different, and you just have a wonderful way of doing it simply, which is a true compliment. If there could be any one compliment for somebody being able to impart information, if you can do it in a way that a kid can understand, you are expert at it. So thanks for that. And I love that you mentioned the part about how, generally speaking, glucose, or carbohydrates for that matter, which turn into glucose in the body, are a sort of dirtier, if you will. I'm using some air quotes here, because they burn in a way that creates a lot of inflammation. And we know that inflammation is not our friend in the long term. In the short term, if we're trying to heal from an injury, a fall, a wound, all of that, a quick short infection, what have you. Inflammation is, of course, our friend. That's acute inflammation. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the inflammation of a chronic nature that's going on day after day, week after week, month after month. And when you eat a heavily, carbohydrate laden diet, as we know, it tends to contribute to that ongoing inflammation, which is basically the root of every illness you can think of, from diabetes to heart disease to cancer to neurodegenerative stuff. So I love how you included that in your explanation, because I feel like that's one of the most important things to kind of remember, is that one is a cleaner fuel than the other. And also, like you mentioned, it's longer lasting. You don't get hangry. And sort of the litmus test I like to tell people they can check like overnight if they're metabolically flexible or not is when you wake up in the morning, just don't eat for a few hours. Make that a 12, 14, 16, 18-hour fast from your overnight. You already got half of it for free, right? Because you were sleeping. And if you don't get hangry and you can go for several more hours, say 16, 18 hours or more, and not get hangry, then you're metabolically flexible. And that's kind of a good, easy litmus test with no, fancy device to measure your breath or your blood or your urine or all the ways that we like to measure ketones. But you did mention something too about, I love how when you talked about the flexibility piece, is that's kind of the goal. I really feel like that's the goal, because if you think of what we did millennia ago, hundreds or thousands of years ago, we ate whatever we could find, whatever was available to us. And we could easily switch between, gathering the tubers under the ground that were highly starchy carbs, or if we had, game that we were able to, eat, whether it be some woolly mammoth or who knows what they were eating thousands of years ago, but they were able to switch back and forth. Like, it wasn't a big deal. So the cool thing is our body can do both, and it can do it well if we help it get to that point. So was there something for you when you first were being introduced I know for a lot of people who just start, at least in my experience, it can be a little rough initially. Maybe speak to that first month and what can people do to kind of limit the, people talk about the keto flu and, all of these other kind of not so awesome symptoms that sometimes, not always, but sometimes people experience when they move towards a low carb diet.
Yeah. So this is where, in hindsight, I was dealing with mold illness at the time of starting the ketogenic diet. And I didn't even know until years and years and years later. And that's probably why I had such a hard time getting adapted and feeling good beyond those 30 days. And we could definitely talk about that. But if you're one of those people listening and you're like, I don't even know how you do the ketogenic diet because I felt like absolute garbage on it, there should be a period of time where you don't feel so good, because it is kind of painful to move your body over. And there are definitely things you can help. But if it goes beyond like a couple of weeks, there might be another root cause kind of limiting your ability to move through that. And if we have time today, I'd love to talk about that. So in those first couple of days, like the first day, you're going to feel kind of dangerous and awesome. Like, look at me, I'm eating all this fat. This is great. But then it kind of sets in, like the first evening, you're like, okay, I could really go for insert thing here, bag of chips, cheeseburger, like fries, whatever you want to think of. I find by like day 3, things start to get a little bit better. The best way you can blow through your glycogen, which is how your body stores glucose, is to do high intensity interval training, especially those first couple days. Like, just blast through it like 3 days in a row if you can, short little bursts of exercise to just get through that glycogen so that you can switch over to ketosis a lot faster. A lot of people do super well on exogenous ketones those first couple of days or weeks, depending on their body. I really like the ones from Perfect Keto. There are other options, but some of them can get kind of expensive. I would start really low and slow with these because they can hurt your stomach and it's a lot to handle for some people, but that can kind of give you a taste of what life is going to feel like beyond those first couple of days, where a lot of people report, I know that I felt like absolute death. Like, there was a period of time where I thought I wasn't going to make it. And that probably had a lot to do with the fact that I wasn't hydrating properly. So I didn't know that your body needed more electrolytes on a ketogenic diet. And so I was just drinking my regular water and I was not hydrating properly. And I was so thirsty and I just couldn't satiate that thirst. So I suggest even before you start the ketogenic diet, a couple of days before, start to incorporate more electrolytes, switch out your gross salt for like the good stuff. Your listeners probably know what that is already, but like gray sea salt or pink salt, just something that's a lot better. And start adding a little bit to your water if you want, or switch to an electrolyte powder that's ideally not sweetened, because a lot of that stuff is absolute garbage. So check the ingredients and make sure that they're good. I really like Element, but everyone has their preferences. And those are kind of like the big things where I find those are the 3 items that if you do those, you're going to feel better. And then it's just about persevering. Maybe don't plan like a restaurant meal on day 5, because you will buckle. Like you just don't have, like, you're like a little fawn in the forest, like you're still tripping over yourself. So give yourself some grace with that. There are so many resources online of like how to order keto at Starbucks, all that stuff. But that stuff can bring in a lot of extra carbs and a lot of confusion. Basically, if in your mind you say, all I'm going to eat is fat and meat and vegetables, you're usually pretty good. And just slowly but progressively work to lower your carbs. You don't have to be 20 grams of carbs per day out the gate, day 1, hardcore. Maybe start at like 70 and then go to 50 and then go to 40 and track your meals and get a sense of things, because I can tell you, I've seen enough of this I've been in the space 15 years. People go so hard out the gate. They last 5 days and they're like, no, it wasn't for me. And it's just like, it was just way too hardcore. You have to set this up like you're going to be doing this and trying to figure out how to make this work long term. And it's just not practical to like go all the way. That's at least what I experienced. Yeah. And I'm a pretty hardcore person, and even I didn't go all the way out the gate. So that says a lot, because usually I do with things.
Yeah, no, I remember reading that you were into marathons before, and anybody that does that routinely, like more than one, is hardcore. And even one, I mean, let's just be honest. I think a marathon's pretty darn hardcore. And I love your advice, because just to go slow, you don't have to go from 100 carbs a day or 150, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of what a lot of people eat per day, down to, 20 on your first day. Like that's just kind of ridiculous. Anyway, it doesn't even sound, healthy or safe or what have you. And it's certainly extreme. And if you want to feel really bad, that's the way to do it. But try to, why do we want to, we don't want to feel really bad. I mean, we want to know something's happening. I think sometimes that's kind of cool. You're like, oh, cool. Yeah, I noticed something's changing. And if it's a little bit of pain in the beginning, that's okay. But the things you mentioned, I found as well, especially hydration is super critical, especially adding some electrolytes, because if you're strictly keto, it's, you're going to want to add that because you're not eating all of the crap, all the processed foods, which have a lot of added sodium, especially. And so having something like you mentioned, LMNT is a great one, but there's lots of others that are out there that are unsweetened or that at least don't have any sugar or carbs in them. I think Rob Wolf came up with the LMNT years back, and he's a cool guy anyway. In fact, he's coming onto my podcast. I think it's next week or something. But any of those versions that are basically real, natural minerals that don't have a bunch of added stuff, because if you just buy it like at a 7-Eleven or some convenience store, a sports drink, like 99% of those are total garbage.
Don't drink vitamin water, and Gatorade doesn't count.
Okay, exactly. Let's just say it like it is. Either it's a bunch of not so awesome carbs, or it's a bunch of artificial stuff. Many of them are, if they say low calorie, there's tons of artificial sweeteners, which are of course not awesome. They cause inflammation. They wreak havoc on your gut, like many not awesome things. So I love the fact that you mentioned the hydration piece and going slow, because I think those are two of the most critical. And typically when I see people do that, they don't struggle as much. And within a few days, they're getting better. Within 1 to 2 weeks, I mean, they're pretty much golden. Like it usually doesn't take a long time to get adapted. But like you said, if it does, maybe you also need to look for something else possibly going on, another underlying issue. Like in your case, you had some mold issues and stuff like that. So that's great advice. Thanks for sharing that with everybody. Let's speak a little bit about, over the years, you've kind of experimented with, going from more strict, super low carb, probably less than 20 grams a day kind of thing, to a more liberal approach. And you add some I think what you call carb ups, if you will, to that. Let's talk a little bit about that. And, first generally, and then maybe add in, after you speak in general terms, how that can relate, especially to women, because I know it's very helpful in women too, to be much more or less strict, I should say.
Yeah, completely. We don't want more strict, although there are those types of women Like I like to see bodies in two different ways. One is like an excess body where they have like excess everything. Their vitality is usually higher. And then we have on the other side of the spectrum, they don't have any more vitality left. And so like being strict on that side of things just generally doesn't work. But yeah, so when I personally started the ketogenic diet, like I said, I progressively lowered my carbohydrates. I got down to 20 grams total carbs per day, and I stuck there for about 6 months, which in retrospect was a terrible, horrible idea. I wouldn't suggest it. At that time, I still had an eating disorder. And so I would go a certain period of time, trigger warning, and then binge and purge for 2 days, and then go back to the ketogenic diet. It was not healthy. I blogged about it. I talked about it. I was really in a bad place. And I see that oftentimes, even if you don't have a diagnosed eating disorder, we'll go right out the gate. We'll do really, really good, quote unquote, air quotes, and then totally go off the handle for 1, 2, 3 days, maybe even longer. And so I really noticed quickly that if I wanted to make this an actual healthy lifestyle and get my life on track, which is what I had wanted to do with the ketogenic diet for my hormones, I needed to allow those foods in. And so I started researching at what point in a cycle, even though I didn't have one, at what point in your cycle would I maybe benefit from adding in more carbohydrates? And it really, I found, went with progesterone. Okay, so if between days 1 to 10, we are eating a low carbohydrate diet, then as estrogen starts to increase, okay, we're going to bring in more estrogen support foods that have higher carbohydrates. Then following ovulation, we're going to go low carb again, and then increasing carbohydrates at the end of our cycle. And when I started doing that and really understanding, at that point, I didn't have a cycle. So therefore I was using the moon cycles. Okay. So when I was using the moon cycles, that's when things started to kind of come into balance for myself. And it gave me more ability to enjoy my diet without feeling too strict.
I think strict for anything for too long can be, I mean, almost not just keto, but in many things can be not healthy. I mean, we got to listen to our body. We got to try to balance, and the ebb and the flow is important. And so you found that the back half of the cycle tends to be having some, carb ups, if you will. Maybe explain that for us. What do you mean by carb ups exactly?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so I found that we all know that if we have carbohydrates first thing in the morning, don't we want so many more carbohydrates? And that can be another sign that we're not metabolically flexible. So at the beginning of the recording, I was saying, yeah, I had potatoes for breakfast, and now I had a macadamia keto bar and I'll be good for the day. I couldn't do that years ago. Like if I had any sort of carbohydrate in the morning, I was like, carbs for snack, carbs for lunch, carbs for snack, carbs for dinner. And so that can kind of be a sign that you're not metabolically flexible, and that's okay. You're not broken. We're just wanting to understand that if you have carbs in the morning, you're going to have carbs all day. So if we have carbs in the evening, we can kind of blunt that response and help our bodies nourish ourselves with specific nutrients. I'm not talking about, what was his name years ago? Like, was it Kiefer, something Kiefer? And he was like the cherry turnover guy. And he said, like, if you worked out on a ketogenic diet and then ate all the cherry turnovers, you'd have like great results. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. So we're using strategic foods to help support our estrogen and progesterone, and doing it at night. So that you kind of like sleep through, like what you were saying, you're sleeping through your fast, you wake up, you fast a little bit longer, and then you're good for the day. You're sleeping through what you would normally want, more carbohydrates, so that you're getting a little bit and you're being strategic with it, but you're not overdoing it, which many of us do. I know I can, or did. I don't so much anymore because things are pretty balanced.
What would you say? So you've mentioned towards the end of the cycle tends to be a better time to add in the carbs. I remember hearing you say that also sort of at ovulation, maybe there might be a day or two before, or I forget. Tell me your experience with that part.
Yeah, you bet. So let's just go through the cycle quickly and talk about, because a lot of people don't know what's the start of my cycle, what's day one, and I get a lot of questions about that. So day one is the first day that you bleed. Okay, so from day 1 to 10, right before ovulation, because you usually ovulate around day 14. So day 1 to 10, low carb, ketogenic, you're great. Then from day like 11 to 14 or so, maybe a day after ovulation in that window, good to incorporate carbohydrates. Then you go low carb again. Okay, so following ovulation, you go low carb again for a couple of days. And then around day 18, 19, 20-ish, you start increasing your carbohydrates again until you bleed, and then you do it all over again. And so if you're not bleeding, like I mentioned, then it becomes, okay, use the moon, choose a moon cycle. So maybe the full moon is your ovulation and the new moon is your period. And that's what I did for a long time. I was like, okay, I just priming my body to be in somewhat of a cycle. Like I cycled everything, like my workouts and my food, and just telling the body, see, we do a cycle thing. And that was really, really helpful, not only physically, but I think mentally too, to like prime my body for that natural cycle.
Hey, do you guys know what I'm really loving these days? I got this epic new device. It's called Lumen, Lumen. It's a metabolic tracker. You remember how I've always said we want a flexible metabolism, one that can operate both on fats as well as carbohydrates and be able to use them for energy in the most effective and efficient way? Well, this device does the job. It tells you where you are with respect to your metabolism. And if you're on your way to metabolic flexibility, it's super, super easy. It doesn't involve any peeing in a cup or any needle sticks, poking yourself, checking blood, none of that. All you have to do is put your lips around it and do a couple of breaths. It's that dang simple. And it really helps you hack your metabolism, gives you all the information that you need, and coupled with the app, it provides you with meal plans and dietary advice and things. It's just really epic. I'm really loving it. It's Lumen. And if you want to check it out, you can get a discount of $50 if you sign up for a device with my code DRTH. All this will be in the show notes, but check it out, lumen.me. It's an epic metabolic hacking device, which I'm using and I'm loving, and I hope you'll check it out too. And with my discount code of DRTH, you can get $50 off. So check it out. Check out your Lumen. All right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love it how you mentioned the moon. And I there actually is science to that. So the lunar cycle is a 28-day cycle. And when you or other women are, doing well with your hormonal balance, your cycle is also 28 days. So you definitely, like, I know you say you don't necessarily hear about evidence for that, but I'm telling you right now from a doctor, there is evidence for that. It's a 28-day cycle, both lunar as well as generally speaking, when you're in your hormonal balance, the women's cycle is about 28 days too. So I love it. There is actually perfect harmony there. So
There really is. There really is. And depending on the type of person you are, some people will ovulate at the full moon. Some people will ovulate at the new moon. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong or you need to change it. It's just become curious about that. And you might find the more time you spend outside, grounding, time in nature, you might actually sync your cycle to the moon. And that is the craziest thing. Like, I just love that.
Oh, that's amazing. You mentioned another one of my favorite things, the grounding thing. Just take your shoes off, take your socks off, walk around barefoot if you can at a beach or a lake or someplace like that where it's really cozy and comfortable. Amazing. If you can just do it in the grass or even on the cement, that's fine too. Grounding is so awesome. So another thing that I know you've experimented with a lot and talked to folks a lot about is sort of this fasting component. A lot of the craze, right, is the intermittent fasting. Maybe speak to how that may play out with keto and with women. Like, what's your experience there?
Yeah. So the exact same template with carb ups you would use for fasting. So again, those days 11 to 14 and then day 18 or 19 onward, you don't want to fast. Okay. So those are the times where your hormones are working really well. They need fuel. You need fuel. You're probably more hungry. Like most women report right before ovulation and right before our periods, we are just hungry beasts. And that's part of it. And that's totally okay. And I think when we have that, the number one issue I have with my keto clients is that they say, but I'm so hungry and I'm in a fast. I'm like, what day of your cycle are you at? And they always say stuff like day 26 or day 14. And I'm like, you should not be doing a fast today. Like, stop, break your fast, have some food. And I think another huge misconception about fasting, and you might disagree with me, some people do, and it's okay. specifically for women, I don't think that we should be using fatty coffee fasts all the time. Maybe once a week if you really, really love it. I used to share something called a rocket fuel latte. I still love those lattes, but I was doing fatty coffees every morning, every day. And while that will help regulate your blood sugar, which is a great added bonus, and if that's where you're at, that's awesome. It's not going to help autophagy long term. And so I would much, much, much rather that my clients do like 1 or 2 water only fasts a week, where for 14 to 18 hours, we're doing just water, not coffee, not fatty coffee, not keto bricks, not none of that, like just water. And so that shift in and of itself, even now that I've overcome a lot of health issues, I do a water only fast once, maybe twice a week. And that's really all I need. And then I'm actually, gasp, having breakfast. And that breakfast might be a little bit later in the day, and my eating window might be a little bit shorter. But so many women are eating like 6-hour days, 8-hour days, every day, fatty coffees in the morning. And it's not working. It's not working.
It's also not natural. And lo siento, sorry, Dave Asprey. I know, you've made your career off of this, but I agree with you, Leanne. I 100% agree to actually have that true fast where you can get all of the benefits of autophagy. It's got to be 0 calorie. Like that's just the way it is. I mean, but the cool thing is you don't have to do it every single day. You don't have to do it all, if you incorporate it a couple of times a week, fantastic. And I think what you said for the coordination with the cycle is golden, because I know what I've seen is in a lot of women, they see that, hey, it's working. I like intermittent fasting, but then they go to the extreme and they intermittent fast like every single day forever. And I'm like, no, don't do it every single day. Even as a dude who doesn't have a cycle, I don't do it every day. I find that it's good to mix it up and to not, because your body, there's another thing that you didn't even mention, but if you do prolong that eating, have these long windows where we're stacking only like say a 6-hour eating window or a 4-hour window because 18 or 20 hours you're fasting, you're also getting your body used to this low caloric state to where it becomes adapted to the low caloric state. And it says, hey, I'm in this kind of like starvation mode. I'm actually going to hold on to those calories even tighter, and it's going to be harder to burn them off. And that's been actually scientifically shown. That's called metabolic adaptation. And so it's actually very good to mix it up, to do everything exactly the same, and especially a real strict form every day. It's not good for this guy up here. It's not good for the mental health, but it's also not good for your body. The body likes flexibility. It likes the, variety. I always tell people variety is not only the spice of life for all the other things, but it is for the way that we eat, for what we eat, all these kinds of things too. So thank you so much. I think it makes it simple for women, especially to coordinate it with their cycle, because so many struggle with, they start the intermittent fasting thing. They're like, well, how come it's not working? And usually I find it's because they're doing it every single day and they're overdoing it.
I've been there. Like,
thank you for that.
No judgment. I did it for like way too long. And you're right. My body had a really hard time. I was sitting at like 1,200 calories. I wasn't losing weight. I wasn't performing well. Now, I mean, I don't count, but I range anywhere between 1,400 calories a day to like 4,000 calories a day. And for the first time ever, I mean, I'm growing muscle like I never could before. And so it's a natural progression, but I agree with you. It's like, guilty as charged. I've done it.
Having the flexibility and variety, there's science to it. The metabolic adaptation I spoke to was the reason that even on 1,200 calories, you weren't losing the weight and that kind of thing, because your body was like, holy crap, I'm in this starvation mode.
Dying.
And we were designed to be able to withstand starvation. Like that's why we have fat in the first place. And that's why it's located around the middle, because it doesn't get in the way of most of the things that we need to do with our legs and walking and arms, grabbing fruits or digging for them or whatever. Like this is all perfectly designed, but when we try to outsmart the body, that's where we get messed up. I think we just need to kind of, move the clock backwards and try to go, okay, how did they do it back then? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we can eat when our body tells us, and fasting overnight makes perfect sense. All these kinds of things. So with respect to women, we've talked a lot about the cycle. What are your thoughts on keto and menopause and sort of hormonal things with low carb during menopause or perimenopause or post, right in that phase of life? What has your experience been with respect to that?
Yeah. Okay. So many thoughts. I'll keep it as simple as I can. The good news is once you've experienced your menopause and you're like post-menopause, you're not getting a cycle, it's been 12 months, it's awesome because you don't have to, pay attention to the carbohydrates as much and the movement as much. And you kind of get into the groove. You no longer have that cyclical hormone cycle. Though I will say the number one issue I see with women who are experiencing menopause, who are kind of at that cusp, their cycles are starting to get a little bit wonky, is that your adrenals are going to start to take over the role of hormone management a lot more. And if you're going into this totally stressed out, you might not have the best experience as you reach your postmenopausal stage. And so I actually got an Instagram message this morning. A lady was saying that she was disappointed with my suggestion that in your 30s, you should start to think about what menopause is going to look like for you. And I don't take that back because I'm 36 and I am constantly, not constantly, but I definitely have in my mind, how am I going to set this up so that my hormones going into this experience, because it'll happen and hopefully never, but that's just my dream. But that your adrenals need to be good. Your DHEA needs to be great. And that's part of the adrenal piece too. Estrogen and progesterone imbalance, not too high estrogen. That's usually the issue, and that ratio. And so there are things you can do in preparation for that. I highly recommend that every woman get a Dutch test at least one time before they're 40 so they can start to kind of look at things. And then, so you've gone 3 months without a cycle, I would definitely suggest getting your blood hormones taken, seeing if there's anything that you can do, support your liver, support your liver, support your liver. Castor oil packs work great for most people to just start thinking, regardless of where you're at, to just start supporting your liver. Your liver and your gut are the places where the hormones happen, liver especially. And so if you've had a life of lots of sugar and all sorts of things, it's not too late to really support your liver. You just might find during that process, as you start to notice that your cycles are changing, it might be more challenging for you to maintain your ketones. It's totally natural. And once you kind of hit that menopause stage, 12 months without a cycle, you're going to start to notice that you're able to generate a little bit more ketones. I've found that most menopausal women, or post-menopause rather, don't generate as many ketones as a woman, say, in her 30s. I don't entirely know why that is, but that's not to say you can't burn fat. And once you experience that, once you've gone through 12 months without a cycle, again, things kind of open up for you. You don't have to eat carbs at a certain time or work out at a certain time. You just kind of like every day is kind of the same. So it opens up a lot, and I find they're able to fast a lot longer, which is great. Whereas somebody who's maybe in their 30s or early 40s couldn't go maybe more than 18 hours. A woman who's experienced menopause can do like 24-hour fasts, like a couple times a month. So that can be really fun for them too.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love how you said that we should kind of be thinking or have it on our radar, just to kind of be prepared, because these changes can happen at any time. And yes, the average age is the latter part of the fifth decade or the latter 40s, but it can happen anytime. So why not be prepared for it? There is that simplicity, like you said, once you're 12 months out after not having your period and you're fully into the menopausal period, that it's just a little bit simple. You're not having the big swings that you had during the years of menorrhea when you're having the monthly cycles. And I think a lot of people kind of like that part, once they get adapted and they kind of get used to how things are going, like that's, and this whole thing you mentioned about the numbers, like of the level of ketones being a little bit harder to get to those same levels in those ages postmenopausal. I've seen that as well. And that's nothing to be like, like, oh my gosh, I'm totally against this kind of like merit badge thing. Like, here I am, I got higher ketones than you. Like, I just think that's so lame, like we're all in a different place of our lives. And if we're in the functionality of ketosis in our body, like for me, just when I go overnight and I don't eat anything, I'm in ketosis. my levels might not be through the roof, but who cares? I can burn fat.
Yeah.
I can go out and do my morning workout and have that actually be effective at burning fat if that's what I want to do. It doesn't matter the level. So like the whole level thing, I hope people are finally getting, I don't know. I feel like in the sort of social media space, there's still a lot of bragging about levels and this and that thing. And I don't think that that's helpful. What's been your experience with the chasing the level?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, I try to educate my clients as best I can with it, but it's so hard when they're hearing like ongoing, your ketones need to be between this and that. And if they're not, you're not burning fat. I mean, I've met plenty of women who are generating ample ketones and not losing weight. I haven't seen a correlation between the two. I think neurologically, like if you're thinking of like brain fog and ability to focus and that sort of thing, I think sometimes the deeper ketones, sometimes the better. But like, you need to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Right. And I don't think that a number one goal should be weight loss. I've never seen that be overly effective for people. If it's that you want to lose weight because you want to run around with your grandkids and that the idea of playing tag with your grandkids just makes you so excited, then that needs to be your why. And when you're worried about your ketones not being 2, check in with yourself. If my ketones are not 2, can I still run around with my grandkids? Like just reframe our mindset. And I think, because, I'm guilty of it too. I look on social media and I'm like, like she has it all figured out. But I remind my clients of this often, with my reels and things that I post, and they're like, why did you say it like this? And I'm like, oh, my life is not perfect at all. I think we lose sense of the fact that the people that we're seeing on our phones are real people with real problems. And it's so much easier to just hyper focus on a number. If it's not calories, then it's carbohydrates. If it's not carbohydrates, it's our ketones. If it's not that, it's our CGM monitors. And these can be great data inputs. And there are people that can just say, oh yeah, my ketones are 0.5. It doesn't matter. But if you're neurotic like I am, it can be really triggering. And so you need to check in with yourself and ask, is this triggering me and stopping? Is it affecting me mentally? And usually the answer is yes. If I take away those ketone monitors and I ask my clients hey, just track how you're feeling on a daily basis. They're I'm feeling great. Everything's good, but as soon as you bring in some of those monitors, it can actually make you doubt your choices. And there needs to be this balance between data's great. And it can tell you when you've overdone it, or maybe you didn't feel a certain thing, and you can ask yourself questions, but it really depends on the type of person that you are. For myself personally, I'll wear a CGM for a couple weeks and be like, oh yeah, blackberries, I can't do those. They spike my glucose like crazy and make me crave. Okay, good data point. But when it starts to be obsessive and I'm updating the app every couple of seconds, I'm like, what now? What now? What's it not now? Then I need to kind of check in and be like, what are my goals? Why am I doing this? And that can kind of bring you back to your center point.
The rest of this show with Leanne Vogel is continuing now, and you don't want to miss any of it. In fact, during these next several minutes, I'll be chatting with Leanne about a few more questions you'll die to hear about, like what to do when you're struggling to lose weight for a long, long time. How do you tackle that? We'll talk about parasites. We'll talk about mold. We'll talk about my favorite topic, metabolic flexibility. And as a bonus, you'll learn why she doesn't eat keto all the time anymore. Right? She wrote the book. She loves keto, knows keto, but now she doesn't do it each and every day, and why she doesn't, and how she's adopted new ways of eating, and more. So in order to get access to all this, join me today in the Thrive community, where you'll get access to members-only content. You'll get the full podcast and show notes. You'll get Q&A sessions with me. You'll get live content that you won't get anywhere else. And you'll join a bunch of like-minded members that want to pursue optimal health, where you can support one another. I will be there as well. And it is just an amazing community to be a part of. So join today, the Thrive community. The link is in the show notes, as well as on my Instagram and my website, thomashemingway.com. You don't want to miss out. Join me and many others just like you in the Thrive community. Until then, we will see you on the other side. Big aloha.
Disclaimer: nothing in this video is medical advice. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.